Hey, what's going on, Weavers? Tim here again. In today's episode, we're learning how to make a snake knot paracord multi-tool pouch. This pouch also has a belt loop on it, so you can keep it on your belt and keep your multi-tool at the ready. So remember guys, if you're looking for where to get paracord and all the other items I use in this video, feel free to check out those affiliate links down below. That being said, let's get into it. So to start this one off, we are using a small piece of microcord that I just stretched across my jig here. You don't have to do it this way, but I do suggest it as it will make it much more easier. Next, I've got my first piece of paracord. I'm going to take the midpoint and I'm just going to put that over the microcord like so. Just going to loop it over that microcord with a midpoint. And from here, I'm going to tie my first snake knot. I'm going to take the strand on the right, loop it behind the strand on the left, like so, kind of like a clockwise loop. Take the strand on the left, put it behind the one on the right, bring it over to the right side, and put it through the loop on the left side, okay? So we're going to tie that first snake knot, and we're going to cinch it up all the way to the top. You don't have to tie it super tight just yet, but get it somewhat firmed up. So that's the first strand. Next, we're going to get our second strand. I'm alternating colors between the burgundy and gray. We're going to do the exact same thing. Take the midpoint, put it right over the microcord like so, right next to our first strand. And then we're going to tie a snake knot again, and ensure that you tie all your snake knots the same way. So I'm always using the strand on the right first, and I'm going to loop it around the strand on the left, but at the same time go through the snake knot on the left side there, like so. See how I went through the loop of that snake knot on the left side? I went from the sort of bottom of the knot to the top. Okay, and then I continued to tie my snake knot the same way with the following strand. So now we have connected our second snake knot. And we're going to continue to do this, and essentially this is like tying mated snake knots, and we're tying a row of our mated snake knots, okay? So it's the same process each time. The strand on the right goes, while doing your clockwise loop, it goes through the previous snake knot. Now I'm going to continue doing this, and for my particular multi-tool, I did about 10 strands, okay, 10 strands across. That will fit the size of my multi-tool, and depending on what you're making this pouch for, that could vary. So for my tutorial purpose, I used this size. So you can see now what I'm doing is I'm just loosening the previous snake knot to make space for that loop to interconnect and made up those snake knots, and then I'm going to tie the snake knot and then close it up. And I'm not tying it super tight just yet. And as you can see now, I've done my full row of 10 strands across. And at this point, you can start to firm them up, like so. So I went all the way across, and now I can tighten up that first row of snake knots. Now I'm going to start my second row, and as you can see, I'm still tying the snake knots the same way with the right strand looping around the left, and you're going to do the exact same process. Okay, I'm going to tie 2 full rows of snake knots. So again, just do the exact same process and make your way across. And what you'll notice this time, I'm just tying them a lot looser. That way I don't have to open up the snake knot. Just a different way of doing it. And I'm just going to continue tying my snake knots loosely all the way across. And then when I get to the end, that's when I'll firm everything up and tighten it. So as you can see, I'm coming to the end of my second row here, and all the snake knots are still very loosely tied, but that's fine. It'll save me time. I don't have to, loosen each knot to tie the following snake knot. And then from there, now that everything's been tied loosely, I'm going to cinch everything up. I'm going to move it all the way up to the very top, get out all the excess, and make sure all those knots are nice and firm. So now that I've tied my 2 rows, I'm going to tie 4 snake knots together, like so, and I'm going to actually firm that up before continuing. And then from there, the next 2 snake knots, I'm going to tie those 2 snake knots and mate those accordingly. because these two snake knots going down the middle are going to be part of the belt loop, all right? So I need that gap in between those snake knots to fit my belt loop through. So as you can see, I'm going to tie these two snake knots, and they're going to be separate from the rest. So I tied 4 snake knots. I'm going to tie these 2. I'm going to firm them up. And once I firm those 2 snake knots up, I'm going to tie the remaining 4 snake knots to the end of my pouch here. So this is the pattern now. I'm going to actually continue for the next little while going down my pouch. And for my particular example here, I tied 8 rows going down my pouch. And that's what seemed to fit my multi-tool the best. So I'm just going to continue this pattern here of tying the 4 snake knots, take a break, tie another 2, take a break, and then tie another 4. I'm going to do that for 8 rows. So as you can see, I've made my way down my pouch and I've got my 8 rows done. And now we're going to continue from there. What I'm going to do now is, again, tie the same snake knots going across, but this time I'm going to mate all of them in a row again. All 10 snake knots are once again going to be mated and connected, and we're going to finish the rest of our pouch this way. And for my particular example, once again, I tied another 4 rows of snake knots after completing the belt loop section. So just continue that process of tying the snake knots loosely, row by row, and then you just firm up those knots afterwards. I found that method the sort of easiest way to keep the snake knots consistent, and I found it the fastest. So I've got those last 4 rows done. Okay, I'm just going to tighten up the last remaining knots, and you will have to kind of go back and tighten them as you're working on them because they are just snake knots. They will come loose. And I've removed it from my jig, as you can see, and I'm going to take out that microcord. Okay, I don't need that anymore, so I took it off the jig, and I'm just going to pull out the microcord like so. Now from here, if you count by pairs, I'm going to go to the 3rd pair of these snake knots, and I've got the ends on a fid here, and I'm going to sort of secure those ends, tuck them back up into the snake knots above, like so. And I'm just going to pull that all the way up, and I'm going to do that with both strands. This is just going to reduce some of the clutter when we close off our pouch. Okay, so with the 2nd strand, I'm going to tuck that up into the snake knots above. And again, when using your fids, be careful not to kind of pierce the paracord as you're doing so. I'm going to pull those up, give them a nice tug, and I'm going to do the same on the other side. So counting in from the right side, 2 pairs in on the 3rd pair. This side is burgundy. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to take my fid and tuck those terminal strands up into the snake knots above. So once you've done that, we can clip off the excess of the paracord. We will have to do that now because we are going to be closing up our pouch. So I'll just again take my scissors, as usual, melt the paracord and press down on it with the knotter's tool to get them nice and secure. In these cases, jet lighters are much better because you can direct the flame, and you can just be careful not to melt any other parts of the pouch. But that's not a huge deal because that will be this will be the inside of the pouch. So if you do, singe the paracord a little bit, it won't be a big deal because you won't be able to see it. So that part is now done. We're going to move on to the next part where we add our sort of elastic stitch to close up the pouch, and it also makes the pouch somewhat adjustable to your multi-tool. So I'm using this shock cord here, and I'm going to tie a simple scaffold knot. I'm going to wrap it around my finger twice, like so. And then with that same very end, I'm going to put it through those 2 loops and pull it tight. Okay, that's going to make those 2 loops cross over, and we have a simple scaffold knot like so. This is just going to be kind of like a simple stopper knot. And you can use thinner shock cord than I did. This is just what I did have on hand, but you can use slightly thinner cord. And I'm going to attach the other end to my fid because we're going to need this to get it through the snake knots. So from the very bottom here on the right side, I'm going to anchor it just on that very bottom snake knot on the bottom right corner and pull that through. And see, the snake knot did loosen up a little, so I'm going to close that up before I go any further. And for my method, I just kind of did a sort of zigzag stitch across these 2 rows of snake knots. If you guys can, come up with something different, feel free to try whatever works best for you. So I'm going to make my way up these 2 rows here by going kind of zigzagging back and forth. So I'm going through this first gray snake knot on the other side, and I'm going to put that through the snake knot like so, and pull all that shock cord through like so. And then now we're going to go back to the right side, and as you can see, I'm just kind of skipping rows, so I'm not going back and forth through every snake knot. It's kind of like every other snake knot on opposing sides. Okay, so that the burgundy snake knot will be one above that gray one on the other side. Okay, and pull all that shock cord through. And I'm just going to continue this pattern, making my way up the pouch. So again, go to the gray side, one above, and pull all that shock cord through. So again, it's just like a simple zigzag all the way up. Overall, I'm pretty happy with this stitch. I mean, it works fine, and I think it looks just fine too. It created a decent looking pattern on the front, and yeah, it's very easy to do. So I'm just going to continue my way all the way to the very top, zigzagging back and forth every other snake knot. And now that I made my way to the top, I'm going to go to the left side here. I want to end up on the very top snake knot on the gray here. And just to anchor it shut, I'm actually going to go back to the burgundy side. And I'm going to, before I can tie any sort of knot, I want to close up the very top of that pouch. And apologize for being a little off camera here, but see, I went through the very top snake knot, just that loop there. And I'm going to pull the rest of the shock cord through, and you can see that's where it kind of ends for me. And at the very top here now, I'm just going to tie another scaffold knot. Okay, so same knot that I started out with, pull that all the way through, and then from there I want to cinch up that scaffold knot to the very end of where I came out of. Okay, so cinch it up right there. And of course, we've got a bit of excess here, so I'm just going to snip off that excess shock cord. And be careful when melting this stuff. Don't melt it too much because it does have a rubber or elastic core, so it will kind of just burn, not melt. So now to the rest of the pouch, to close it off, I've got 4 strands coming out the bottom, and what I'm going to do is tie a square knot. I figured this. So to start that, I'm going to take one strand and bend it over, and take the following strand and kind of make an elbow and go kind of 90 degrees to that. And I'm going to continue doing the square knot like so. Okay, see each strand kind of makes an elbow around the previous strand like so. And if this example is not super clear, I do have other examples of the square knot that I will link to in this video. But I've tied one square knot like so, and I didn't think that would be too secure, so we're going to tie 2 before we clip off any excess cord. So again, I'm just going to bend the 2 strands over like that, and then I'm going to take the strands that are perpendicular to that, go over, under, like so. Okay, and then again, you can cinch that up, tighten up that square knot, and from here we can now clip off our excess cord. And I do suggest you clip off the cord as you go when finishing this pouch, because you need that space to kind of work. So yeah, same process. I'm gonna clip the cord, melt it with my lighter, press down on the knot there, press down on the end there with the knotter's tool. And do be very careful when melting the cord here, because there's a lot of surrounding paracord and you don't want to make any unsightly burn spots. So I just did that for all 4 strands. And for this particular strand here, the one that's facing all the other cords, I took extra caution in melting this one because you don't want to burn the surrounding paracord. So that is how I closed off one set of the 4 strands, and as you can guess, we're going to do that for the rest of the sets of strands there. You know, it looks like quite a mess, but that's what we're going to do. And you're just going to do that for the next 3 more sets, right? Because we have 4 strands of each of the gray, burgundy, and gray. And you see how the shock cord scaffold knot is kind of just sticking out there? That's just going to get tucked in to the inside of the pouch as we go. As you can see, I just tied another square knot, and we're going to do that all the way down our pouch. And I took care to tie the square knots all in the same fashion so that the melted ends are all the kind of same when they come out. So I'm kind of, they look consistent. So as you can see here, all the melted ends look the same. And I'm just using my sort of knotter's tool here to kind of shield the rest of the paracord from getting melted there. I didn't want to, you know, burn the surrounding area. So as you can see, we do have some unsightly melts there, and I found using a Sharpie for these darker colors works just great. It'll be a little different if you're using a lighter color, but for a darker color, coloring in those ends with a Sharpie I think works fine. You can use paint or anything else you want, or you can just leave them if it doesn't bother you. But I decided to just touch up those ends there and hide those melts with a Sharpie marker. And there we have it. There is our snake knot paracord pouch. So it does fit my Leatherman wave just fine. I did design or size this pouch accordingly to that, and it does stick out just a little bit so you can still grab the pouch. But to be honest, you can make this sort of snake knot pouch for any sort of multi-tool. You could even make it for like a pocket knife, and I think that would work just fine. You will just have to size it accordingly. And yeah, I think overall this pouch turned out really great. Big shout out to Sean over at East Coast Cord on Instagram. He made a pouch out of snake knots that inspired this tutorial, and through a few DMs he told me what he did and kind of came up with this based on his ideas. And as you can see, the pouch also fits the multi-tool when the multi-tool has been opened. In case, you know, you're working with your tool, you just need to, you know, place it back in the pouch briefly before you grab it again. You don't have to open and close it all the time. And it still does work that way, so that really worked out. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. A huge thank you to all my Patreon supporters as usual. If you guys want access to exclusive tutorials and you like what I do in this channel, feel free to check out my Patreon page, link in the video as well as down below. Hope you guys like this video. Hope you'll try it out. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to check out what I have to offer on the rest of my channel.